Sebastian Gearhart is a Norwegian-born magician who at 22 was diagnosed with what was thought to be an inoperable brain tumor. However, after 2 surgeries and learning to walk again, he is back to performing with an interesting outlook on life and an interesting story to tell. I hope you'll come and join me as we go to meet Sebastian Gearhart, and let's all remember, glass is already broken. So I'm here with Sebastian Gearhart. We met at the Rose City Comedy Club. He's a magician and somewhat of a comedian, and I think he's got an interesting story. He gave me a little bit about it. So if you'll just introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sebastian. I've been a magician for pretty much all of my life and started performing over at Shy's Rose City Comedy a couple months ago.
So when we met, you told me you were from Norway originally. Like, are your parents born and raised there and everything? Or?
Yes. So I was born in Oslo myself, but my dad was actually from Norway. Native. He grew up, spent his childhood there. He went to college in America. My mom was actually from Florida. She was born in Miami.
Yeah.
Hollywood specifically, but yeah.
Yeah. So, what was, like, how long did you live in Norway?
So I lived in Norway until I was about 4 or 5. It was pretty early in my life, so I can't remember the exact date. But then we moved to Florida for a couple years and then back to Norway.
Yeah.
It was actually funny because by the time I was 18, I'd lived in 18 different houses.
Wow.
We moved around quite a bit.
Yeah. Why was that? Was it just your dad's work, or?
I wish there was a good reason for it. I don't know. Like, my dad has always been into real estate, so I guess that he just kind of rode the market or whatever he did, but sometimes he would stay in a house for 2 years, sometimes it was 6 months.
Yeah.
So
what was growing up in Norway like? I mean,
magical would be the most easy word to use for it. At one point, we lived in a log cabin in the middle of the woods. So it was this small Norwegian town called Yetra Enebakk. And we lived literally 2 miles back in the woods up a huge hill. And we lived in this cabin, which thank God had air conditioning, but no plumbing. So it was an interesting experience.
So just at an outhouse, or?
No, we had a toilet. It was in the bottom of the house. And once every couple weeks, me or my brother would have to go with my dad, bag up all the family's stuff, carry it up the mountain, dig a hole and bury it so no animals would get to it.
So did it, like, drop it down into a bag, or?
Yeah, it's kind of like a almost like a porta potty inside a house, but it didn't smell quite so bad. So it was somewhat contained. No septic or anything like that.
Yeah. So do you remember why you moved back to Florida for a time, or?
I think my parents had been married not too long, and she was not overly thrilled with living in a country that she didn't speak the language of and wasn't culturally used to. Which
Yeah.
I understand, because when we moved back to Norway, I lived there for 3rd and 4th grade as well. And it was cool. The people were very friendly, but it was just very much a culture shock.
Yeah.
And everyone started learning English in like 2nd and 3rd grade, so I was able to communicate with my classmates.
So you passed that class with fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
National history, I love it.
Gotta be in English, right?
Yeah, no, I did well in the English section for sure.
Yeah. So I guess what would the difference is, you say, between living in not just Florida, because everybody knows living in Florida is different from living anywhere. But,
Florida and Texas are very similar. They're like kind
really?
of brother states almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the difference between that and Norway?
Seasons, for starters. They actually have seasons over there. The summer is very short, but it's beautiful. The weather is fantastic. It's not too hot, not too sweaty. They don't have mosquitoes, which I'm a huge fan of. I'm actually allergic to mosquitoes.
Oh,
so like nothing bad or crazy.
Fun.
Yeah, no, and actually I just remembered they do have mosquitoes, not as bad as Florida, but when we were living in the woods, there was a lake running through the backyard, or a stream, and mosquitoes would just breed and nest and all that over the stream. So I would go out and play in the woods with my brother and come back and just have 20 mosquito bites on my arms. And he was not allergic, so his would go away the next day, but mine would stay for about a week. It was fun.
That's weird, because like I've watched documentaries about like Russia and like Alaska, and they seem to have way worse than we do out I don't know. I guess it's still a different climate.
Texas isn't that bad. I remember when I first came out here, everyone was like, "Oh, you got to be careful. It's really humid. We have a lot of mosquitoes." And I just kind of look at them and chuckle and go, "No, you don't. Florida is a swamp." Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So how'd you get into magic?
So it started when I was really young. In grade school, a buddy of mine learned a card trick online, and he taught it to me. And I completely forgot about it for the longest time, and eventually I got the chance to perform it again, and it was amazing. It was a very simple trick, but I did it, and their minds exploded. And it was the coolest thing that I've ever seen, and I was able to bring that emotion to people that I knew, that experience.
Yeah.
And that was the most euphoric thing for me, is to just with a deck of cards be able to, oh my God, have that sort of David Blaine style reaction that was like, it's a really weird thing to explain. It's an incredible moment that you get to share with someone. And the ability to do that really drew me into it.
From that on, was it just your niche?
Yeah, no, I remember I performed it for some extended family. And then my aunt taught me how to riffle shuffle with the bridge in the hands.
Yeah.
And I went home and I practiced that for 3 days straight. Like I had a deck of cards on my nightstand. I would wake up first thing in the morning and practice shuffling cards. So I just snowballed from there.
Yeah. So what did you go on to do from there? Was it just...
Yeah, so that was when I was about 12, 13. At 14, I started going to local magic meetings in Orlando. Which is a funny story of how I found out about those. Sorry for the lack of a segue here, but my great-grandmother passed away, and I didn't know her that well. I'd met her once or twice. And at her celebration of life in Miami, Florida, it turns out her neighbor's ex-husband was the president of a magic club in Boca Raton, Florida. So I did some magic at her celebration of life, and her neighbor puts me on the phone with her ex-husband and says, "You need to talk to him right now." So I talked to him, and he says, "Okay, send me your info, and I'll send you the info for your local magic clubs." So because he sent me that, I went to a local meeting in Orlando, and I started meeting other local magicians. And they started teaching me what they knew and started telling me what I should practice and work on. And that continued to build, and then I met a magician at one of the local meetings. His name was Kostya Kimlat, and he was starting a company called Restaurant Magic Business, where he had a bunch of different restaurants around Orlando that he was having magicians go and perform at on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So he was looking for extra talent in Orlando that would be able to fill this need that he had. So I started working with him, and the company transitioned from Restaurant Magic Business to, it's called Sea Magic Live now. And they're actually the official magicians for the Orlando Magic. And they perform for Disney and a whole bunch of restaurants around Orlando.
Yeah.
So I started working with them.
So, like, any real cool places you got to work?
Yeah. So the one that was probably my favorite in Orlando was a family-owned Del Frisco's restaurant. They ended up rebranding because they were the Christner's family, so they ended up calling it Christner's Prime Steak and Lobster.
Yeah.
And it was this gorgeous restaurant. Spanned, it was 2 buildings worth of space. They built it out. They'd owned it for years and years and years. And it was this amazing Del Frisco style steakhouse, where that is where I developed my love of dirty martinis, is that place. It was fantastic. And steak and magic and everything, the finer things in life. They had a piano bar, whole 9 yards. It was a beautiful, beautiful venue.
Yeah. So you told me, so what age are you when you're doing this?
So I started working with the company when I was 14.
Yeah.
And then I started really, really getting busy with them about 16, 17.
So just wondering, how much do you make at that?
It varies depending on the venue and the event.
Yeah.
So the restaurants it would vary depending on the restaurant as well. So I'm not sure. I think I signed some documents saying I'm not allowed to talk exact numbers.
Oh, okay.
But they paid well enough.
Yeah.
Very, very far from minimum wage.
Yeah. So you're doing this and everything. You told me that at, I think, 21 or 22, they found a tumor.
So, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you're fine.
But when I was 22 years old, I'll tell the whole story or just kind of...
Go into the whole story. This
Cool.
is long form, man.
Love it. Love to hear that. So at 22, I had just started dating this girl. Her name was Hannah. Super cute. Loved her. Love her. Sorry, don't know why I said that past tense.
I used to. She's okay.
She
now.
was my girlfriend at the time. She's my wife now, is why I'm being awkward. Like, no, love her so much. But no, we had just started dating, and this was actually was Mother's Day. It was back in May of 2018, and I was introducing her to my family. We went over to my mom's house for Mother's Day, and we had a great time. My family absolutely was enamored by her. She was fantastic. My family, just everyone got along so well. And I woke up the next morning with this really bad headache. And I was like, wow, I'm hungover. I really don't deserve this. I did not drink that much. But I was like, all right, fine, we'll just wait it out. And the next day I woke up and I was still hungover, air quotes.
Yeah.
And that lasted for about a week, where I just had this debilitating migraine. I could barely get out of bed. When I would stand up, I felt woozy. It was just not a good time. And Hannah and I had been dating for about a month at that point, and I was basically bedridden. But she would still come over towards the end of the day when she got off of work and kind of help me out, take care of me. And after about a week of that, she said, you need to go to a doctor. This isn't normal. And I was like, you're absolutely right. So I went to an urgent care, a local little urgent care center, and the doctor diagnosed me with an inner ear infection. So that explained the headache, all that stuff, and he wrote me a prescription for some steroids and sent me on my way. He said, tomorrow morning your headache should be gone. I woke up the next morning and it was worse.
So how long did you live with it before you actually got it diagnosed?
So the next day when I woke up and it was worse, I was looking in the mirror and I noticed that my right eye didn't have its full range of motion. Like, I would look to the left, my right eye would stop about halfway. So I was talking to Hannah about that, and she was like, yeah, that's definitely not normal. So my stepdad's an optometrist. So I gave him a call, and I asked if I could come in and see him. He said, sure thing, first thing in the morning. So the next morning, I went over to his optometry practice, and he took a microscope to my eyes. And he looked at them, and he saw that the nerve endings behind my eyes were being pushed forward, which he said is usually a sign of pressure in the head. We hope that pressure is there for no reason, but we're going to find out for sure. So he sent me in for a CT scan. And I went over to the CT scan. Hannah drove me, thank God, because my vision was going all wonky with my eye not being able to move properly. And I remember after the CT scan, the technician asked me to wait in the lobby afterwards real quick, which never a good sign.
Yeah.
So about 10 minutes later, I get a phone call from Ray, my stepdad, and he says, hey, hand the phone to Hannah. So I hand the phone to my girlfriend, and they talk for about 30, maybe 40 seconds. She hangs up the phone and says, okay, we're going to the emergency room. At this point, no one will tell me what's going on. So we get to the emergency room. We get escorted back to one of the rooms, and after a little bit of a wait, the doctor walks in. He's got this flowing white hair, older gentleman, and he says, hello, my name Dr. Jenkins. Because of where brain tumor located, too close to brain for us to operate. That's how I found out it was a tumor, man. Like, literally, this guy walks and says, sorry, it's too close to your brainstem. We're not going to be able to operate on it. So we're going to try chemo. Probably won't work. You should probably say goodbye to everyone that you care about. And that was how I found out I had brain cancer.
So, I guess what's your outlook on life at this moment? What are you thinking about? How are you?
Yeah, so it's been a wild ride. I was 22 at the time, so it's a hell of a time to get diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. I came to terms with the fact that I was probably going to die. So at this point, it reminds me of an old, I want to say it's Buddhist or Taoist, one of those ancient philosophies. But have you heard of the idea that the glass is already broken?
I think so.
It's a really interesting idea, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering this story. But the idea is that the story goes, there were two monks having tea, and one of them sets their cup down, it falls off the table and breaks. And the other one says, oh, I'm so sorry your glass broke. And the monk looks over and he says, don't worry, it was already broken.
Yeah.
The idea being that if you look at everything in your life, everything is going to break or die or end. If you look at it as already over, when it happens, it's just, it already was. So there's no loss or sadness, it's just, it already was.
So
life at this point, it's every moment is a gift. This is all borrowed time. I died at 22 is the way that I look at it.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like a rebirth, or I'm not sure how the best way to describe it would be, but this is all borrowed time.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to come to that view of thinking?
I was already familiar with that sort of parable before I got diagnosed, and I thought that it was interesting, but I'd never really looked at my life through that lens before. So I had a lot of time to think after the diagnosis. I was After my second brain surgery, I had to relearn how to walk. So I had a lot of time just in bed with just me and my thoughts, which at the time was not a great, experience for me, but now looking back on it was very useful as far as reshaping my perspective on things. But yeah, it makes me feel grateful because literally anything, like, don't get me wrong, bad things still happen in my life, but on a scale of 1 to brain cancer, it could be so much worse.
Yeah. So you said, they weren't going to operate on it. Then you talked about your second surgery. So if you don't mind, could we go into that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely, of course. Yeah, so the first doctor, his name was Dr. Jenkins. Very, very great neurosurgeon. But because of where the brain tumor was located, it was called a pineoblastoma, was the type of brain tumor, which is on the pineal gland, which is literally right on top of the brainstem. So the pineal gland's in charge of producing melatonin, regulating your sleep schedule. So because of where it was located, he didn't want to operate on it because he would probably have killed me, which I appreciate his understanding and his care in that regard. But there was another doctor at that hospital, because the hospital that I went to was actually one of the top neurosurgical institutes in the country, which happened to be 20 minutes from where I lived, thank God. There was another doctor, his name was Dr. Melvin Field, and that man is an enigma in the best possible way. Like, he's just the coolest guy you'll ever meet. Like, I would love to grab a beer with him, and I felt totally confident with him cutting my head open and poking around in it. Like, in his spare time, when he's not performing neurosurgery, he photographs for National Geographic in his spare time. Wow. Like, just whenever he's got a vacation, he goes to some foreign destination and takes pictures for National Geographic. And I remember
Hobbies of a brain surgeon.
Yeah. And I remember the first time he walked into the hospital room, my wife was reading a book by Ken Follett. I can't remember which one, but these books are huge, like at least 500 pages. And he goes, "Oh, who's reading Ken's book?" And my wife kind of raises her hand to me, and he goes, "Oh, I vacation with him in the winter sometimes." So he just casually vacations with my wife's favorite author, sometimes for fun. Just what a guy. Yeah. And he was able to operate on the tumor. So the first one that he did was I can't remember the exact name of the procedure. I'm going to blame that on the brain cancer. But where he cut open the front of my head, and they took biopsy. He took a small sample of the tumor so he could send it off to the lab and have it tested to see what kind of brain tumor it was. The second one was a third ventriculostomy was the name of the procedure, where he cut open, I think it was actually, he did both those surgeries at the same time, both those procedures, where he kind of popped a hole in my brain. Because of where the tumor was located, it was blocking what's called the third ventricle, which is where all your cerebrospinal fluid drains out of your brain.
Yeah.
So because of where the tumor was located, it kind of blocked that hole. The metaphor that he gave me was like a clogged sink. That was what was causing the headache, yeah. So it was hydrocephalus is what the condition is called, where your head's just filling with brain fluid. And because of that, that's what caused, I've now got nerve damage in my right eye that I couldn't move fully earlier because that was so much pressure that it was blocking the nerves. So he popped a hole in there so the brain fluid could drain by itself. So he was incredible in so many regards. Like, I'm so grateful to have met him, and I hope I never meet anyone like him ever again.
So the second surgery where you said you couldn't walk afterwards, what was that? So
that was let me see if I can get this right. It was the supracerebellar infratentorial approach and resection of a pineal gland tumor was the name of the surgery, where he cut open the back of my head all the way down to my neck, and he reached in with some tools, and he was able to remove all of the tumor. Before he actually did the surgery, he thought he could get 60, maybe 80%, but he didn't want to risk anything. But after the surgery, he was like, it looks like I got it all. So because of all the internal stuff they were doing, it just totally, and it was all in my central nervous system where the surgery was. I was bedridden. I had to relearn how to walk.
So what was that experience like?
It was interesting, to say the least. I remember before the surgery, I asked him, because I'm a magician, so I asked him, if this surgery, if anything goes wrong, is there any chance that I might lose motor function or not be able to do sleight of hand? And he kind of looked at me and he chuckles. And he goes, oh, no, this isn't that type of surgery. This is the type of surgery where if anything goes wrong, you just won't wake up. So I woke up, thank God.
Goes, okay, breathe in and count to...
Yeah, exactly. Oh, cool. We're going to anesthesia now. We're going to knock you out now. Yeah, but the whole being bedridden was not fun, which is kind of me with my thoughts. I was grateful that I'd woken up, for sure.
Yeah.
So it was just this kind of, okay, now I've been given this gift. What am I going to do with it? And as I'm laying in bed, I started thinking about my life and what I'd accomplished and what I wanted to do. And I realized that first of all, my dreams of grandeur and traveling the world and being a world-famous magician, those kind of felt less important at that point. Because when I was sitting in the hospital on the operating table or in the MRI machine and thinking about my life and what I wanted to do, don't get me wrong, performing in big stadiums and for large audiences seems fun, but the thing that I really, really wanted, the thing that meant the most to me would be to have a family, have a legacy to pass on, that sort of thing. So I had been dating my girlfriend Hannah for about a month, and I realized I need to propose to her because she is a ride or die. She's been with me. She's been sleeping in this hospital bed with me for the past 10 days.
Yeah.
And that's technically against hospital policy, but no one's going to tell the 22-year-old with brain cancer, hey, you can't do that.
Yeah. That give you a little bit of freedom while you're in there?
No, I could barely move. When I was in the hospital, the first brain operation they did was they shaved half my head off. They drilled a hole into the back of my head, and they stuck a tube in there so it could drain the spinal fluid out of my head. And I couldn't change my position in bed. I couldn't lean up or lean back without a nurse coming in and adjusting the angle that the wire was hanging at. So my brain would continue to drain, otherwise it would fill back up. So, yeah, freedom, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, no, I just meant you could get away with a lot more, I suppose. But
not much. I can barely move.
Not when you can't move, huh?
I would kind of lift my arm up. She would snuggle underneath, and that was the extent of anything that could happen.
So you propose and everything.
Yeah.
How long until you can walk again?
I actually had to train being able to walk without a walker and then getting down on one knee so I could propose. Or actually, my wife was at work, my girlfriend at the time was at work, and my stepdad and I actually practiced getting down on one knee in front of him so I could practice doing that. Because the way that the proposal went is my family vacationed some summers in Maine because my grandparents have got a house up there that they spend the summers in. They're snowbirds. So my family was up in Maine, and I couldn't fly because after the brain tumor where it had been located, they were like, don't change air pressure like that. So my girlfriend, I'm just going to call her my wife from now on just because we're married.
Yeah.
So my wife and I drove from Florida to Maine, and on the way up there, we actually stopped in New York because there was a show called In and of Itself in New York that I wanted her to see so bad. And I wasn't sure when it was going to end. I was like, this needs to happen. You got to see this show. And when we drove up, we stayed in New York for a night. Walking to that show from the hotel was the first time since the surgery that I walked without a walker. I was able to walk independently. So then we got to Maine, and I was finally able to, walk around somewhat normally, and I was able to get down on one knee and propose. But wow. It's like this whole journey cross country.
Yeah. So what's your life been like since then? What have you done?
It's been interesting, man. So I am now technically disabled. I'm what the government will call visually impaired. Right now I see two Isaacs.
Yeah.
Because of the nerve damage in this eye, I've got permanently double vision. Scientific name is diplopia. So just my eyes don't agree with each other. So the glasses that I've got help. These are called prism lenses. Where they kind of bend the light so the images kind of come together. But now there's 1.5 Isaacs as opposed to two completely separate ones.
Yeah.
So that's been interesting living with that. Thank God it hasn't impacted my muscular ability at all. So I'm still able to work out, do magic, all that stuff. But it's very, very interesting in that regard. Now I'm just trying to perform as much as I can and make things happen. So
yeah.
Moving out to Texas has been interesting for that.
What encouraged the moving to East Texas?
So back when the pandemic started, my wife had been working at Disney. I was performing magic, and everything shut down. and we were both just kind of contemplating what we should do. We weren't sure how serious the virus was. There were so many variables that we decided to move in with her mom for the course of the pandemic to kind of quarantine there.
Yeah.
So we came out to Kilgore, stayed with her mom for a few months, and while we were out here quarantined, bored out of our minds, we found a house in Henderson. We were house hunting just for fun, figured get out of the house somehow. Mm-hmm. And we found a house in Henderson, fell in love with it, and made an offer, and it was accepted. So started moving all the stuff from Florida out to here, and then eventually we lived there for about 2 years. Then a house went up for sale a couple doors down from my mother-in-law, so now we've just finished moving over there, and we're getting all our stuff organized. But that was the initial thought process, was we're out of work, we need to make something happen, so we came out here, and after meeting Britt and discovering the wine trail, which we haven't talked about yet, that kind of opened up so many more avenues for performing out here, and it's looking very, very exciting.
So, yeah, we can talk about, we're at Brits Weinendine now. So tell us how that came about.
There's this cool spot in Kilgore, Texas called Brits Weinendine. Britt is a fantastic guy. He makes delicious wine. I've never been a wine guy, ever. I've always thought that it was, some of that, I've always been a whiskey drinker, all right? So when my mother-in-law was like, oh, we got to go over to Brits for some wine, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And we came out, we did a wine tasting, and my life has not been the same since. I love a good dry red wine, and Britt's Texas Tuscan is absolutely amazing. He actually just walked in, so that's fun. Hi, Britt. Just telling them how I love your Tuscan. I could be. So that kind of transitioned me towards enjoying wine, and then Britt told me, because Britt and I immediately hit it off. He was just such a warm soul, warm spirit. I mentioned the idea of having magic at the winery, and he loved the idea. So we scheduled a meeting for the next day, talked about some different ideas and offerings we could make at the winery with magic, and it's been amazing since then. We've got regular magic happening every Saturday from 2 to 4. We're working on magical wine tastings, and once he gets everything up and running, we're going to be doing a magical dinner show.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a 4-course meal, 90-minute show, full-on experience, and it's going to be fantastic.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
So, like with the magic, and you said you came out of here, you were out of work. Mm-hmm. So, did you have to take up another job, or have you managed to?
I've managed to just do this with magic.
Really?
As if by magic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's part of the trick, right?
Exactly, that is part of the trick. So one of the other things that Britt told me about is that apparently there is an East Texas wine trail where there are, I want to say, at least 20 wineries out here in East Texas that all kind of have similar offerings where they do locally grown Texas grapes and they make wine out of them. Mm-hmm. So now I'm also performing at Brits. I'm also at Los Pinos over in Pittsburgh, and I'm talking to a few other wineries about bringing magic to them. So it's really exciting to have all these different venues in a niche that I'd never even imagined, let alone knew existed.
Yeah. That's cool, man. So I got a question. Like, so with the magic tricks.
Yeah.
Is it like to where all of them have been done, you just learn ones that have already been made, or are you like coming up with stuff yourself?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
So even when you're creating something new, it's always you're standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
Where you can take ideas like, there's the classic trick, I'm sure you've seen it before, the cups and balls. Yes, where the ball under the cup. And
Yeah.
So that literally dates back to ancient Egypt. Mm-hmm. And for the longest time, that was the measurement of how good of a magician you were, is how good is your cups and balls routine, or how good is your... So there are many different classic plots in magic, and there's different ways to revise those. New things are getting rarer, because it is one of the oldest professions in mankind, but it does still happen. Even if it's changing a certain aspect of something, there is new stuff under the sun, but it's getting fewer and farther between, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's actually a magician, his name is Daryl Fitzke. He wrote a book called The Trick Mind. And he broke down all the different ways that a magician can pretend to break the laws of physics and do magic, make impossible things happen. So there's 21 different effects that you can do with magic, but there's different props, different presentations, different meanings, different ideas you can incorporate into those basic ideas.
So just between all those different combinations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can. There's magic as a story. There's magic as a metaphor. There's just a trick. Hey, look what I can do. there's so many different ways to present it. There's the mechanics of it, and then there's the presentation of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So what would your presentation be? Or do you have one?
So when I was recovering from my surgery and trapped in bed and thinking, I had an interesting thought. And I'm still excited about this. I'm actually performing the first rendition of the show in October in Gladewater at Jackson's Cozy Theater. It sounds really weird, but it's a magic show where no magic happens. Let me explain. So imagine, a magic trick traditionally, imagine if I handed you a Rubik's Cube, you mixed it up, I took the Rubik's Cube, I shook it, and then all of a sudden it was solved. Mm-hmm. Magic, right? But imagine I hand you a Rubik's Cube, you mix it up, I set it on the table, and I show you, I've got over here another Rubik's Cube that perfectly matches the one that you just mixed up. Not magic, but so statistically improbable that it wouldn't happen in this lifetime. Or the next one or the next one. So not things that are quote-unquote magic, but statistical improbabilities. And my thought process for this, behind this, was me being alive right now isn't magic, it's just really, really unlikely.
Yeah.
So trying to infuse that feeling that I've got where this shouldn't be possible, but it is, and we're here in this timeline, this version of reality where these things happen.
So
coincidence-based magic.
The artist's expression there.
Yes,
yes. You're
so
putting yourself into what you're doing.
Yeah, so trying to infuse the magic with that idea of coincidence, serendipity, of it's not impossible, but it wouldn't happen in this lifetime.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited about that concept working with magic. It's never been done in a mainstream platform. I've heard other magicians behind the scenes doing that sort of thing, but I've never seen it personally myself.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very excited for that. And that's exactly what it is, trying to have that artistic interpretation, because for me, that's what magic is now. It's not, look, the card changes color or something. That's still cool. That's not what real magic is to me. Real magic is something that shouldn't be possible happening.
Yeah.
You know?
I gotcha. So, do you have any place where people could find you?
SebastianTheMagician.com. I'm also on Facebook, Sebastian the Magician, and Instagram, Sebastian Gerhardt Official.
No, you may have to tell them how to spell that.
We can put it in the about section of the video or the yeah. Okay, but we will do that. Yes. All the links down below.
Yeah, I'll put all the links in there. Well, thank you for meeting me today. This has been a real great interview. It's a real cool place here and everything.
Yeah, no, we'll have to have you come back out. I'm actually performing this afternoon from 2 to 4, so if you want to come back out, you're more than welcome. First class is on me.
It's like an hour drive for me.
Oh, that's a bit of a hassle. I can understand.
Maybe one day, though.
I'll probably see you over at Rose City at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I also perform over there as well as the wineries.
Yeah.
I'm performing over at Rose City Comedy in Tyler, Texas. So Friday nights open the show most nights.
I guess since we're talking about things anyway, how did that come about? How did you meet Sean?
Yeah, so a buddy of mine, speaking of serendipity and impossible things happening, I was shipping a package at the post office to a magician friend of mine that lives in Dallas. And the guy behind the counter goes, "Oh, what you shipping off today?" And I said, just something for a magic friend. And he goes, "Oh, I'd love to have a magic friend." And I said, "We should grab a drink sometime." And this was during the pandemic, so I was, kind of like, yeah, we should get a drink. And then he actually followed me on Instagram, and we ended up meeting up for a drink a couple months later, and we hit it off. His name is David, and I don't know if David's listening to this, but hi, David, love you, man. That's my best friend out here in Texas. He's a great guy, love that dude, and he loves stand-up comedy. That was one of the things we initially bonded over. So there was an open mic night going on over in Tyler that he was like, "Yeah, man, you should come out." And he went out 1 week without me. And he said, "Oh my God, Sebastian, you've got to come do this." So I went out, and it was at Rose City, and I performed some magic, and Shai loves magic, the owner. And I ended up talking to him, started bringing me in for the shows on Friday nights, and just kind of snowballed from there.
That's cool, man. So
yeah.
Everybody, if you're local in Tyler or anything, definitely go check out Rose City Comedy and check out Sebastian. He's there all the time.
Yeah.
Thanks for the interview, man.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Hi, I hope you enjoyed listening to the interview, and if you did, go ahead and just like and follow or whatever it is on the platform you're listening to. That just helps me reach more people. Thanks. I saw you just do that. You're pretty neat.